He is the executive director of the Municipal League of Metro St. Louis. And for some of you, that may seem like a very foreign group of people. You've never heard of them before. For others, you may know who the Municipal League of Metro St. Louis is. But today we're going to explore the league, find out what it is, what it does. Just as a side note, Pat is the executive director, and this year I've been serving as the president of the Municipal League as well. So Pat and I have an opportunity to work hand in hand together, and it's been a really exciting year for us. In spite of the pandemic, we've been doing an awful lot of work. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Pat, tell the residents, what is the Municipal League? Who are we? What do we do, and what do we do?
So we are a nonprofit organization made up of our bylaws restrict us to the municipalities of St. Louis County government, and St. Louis City government. The league was first founded in 1917. So we just celebrated our 100th year in 2018, July 17th of 2018 was our 100-year anniversary. And we help local governments, and our motto, if you want to call it that, is that we collaborate, we educate, and we trying to think of our last phrase. We advocate on behalf of local governments. The advocate part of it is that we I had to, when I took this position, had to become a registered lobbyist. Maybe a kind of negative to some people, but that's the law in the state of Missouri. If you're going to be in the Capitol and working on pieces of legislation for or against that are really impacting local government. The league also sponsors for education. We have a training academy. We hold monthly training sessions. We actually open those up to municipalities across the state. We have one this next Thursday. We have over 150 people registered for that training academy next Thursday afternoon. So we try to educate local leaders and city staff. We have programs, anything from sunshine law to the bidding process for public works projects to labor issues facing municipalities. So that's an ongoing education program that we have. And then we collaborate, which I think is really one of the most important things that we do. We have monthly meetings for our membership. It's an opportunity for elected officials at all level, mayors and aldermen, to come together, talk about their local issues. We always have a presentation, and we do our league business, approving minutes and those kinds of things, and budget. But the biggest benefit to the members is really that ability to meet and talk with other elected officials and really learn from the experiences other cities are having.
Right. And I think, one of the things that collaboration is an important part of the group, as you said. I know from my experience in meeting with other mayors, both from other smaller municipalities, say the size of Olivet, or larger municipalities, you understand how they are governing or thinking, or issues that affect all of us. We can have these sorts of conversations to get a pulse of what everyone is thinking, and then come together and perhaps even figure out a solution that might work for all of us. And I think that has been a huge benefit for me personally, but I know for other members as well. I'd like to get into a little bit more about what the league is doing out in Jeff City, especially this year. I know it's been an interesting start and stop to the year because of COVID, but let's talk about our legislative. How do we attack the legislative situation in terms of what is our overarching legislative viewpoint, and then what specifically are we working on in Jefferson City this year for the benefit of the municipalities?
So last year when COVID first hit and things shut down in Jeff City, that's when kind of this strange situation took place. But So we ended the session last year really working on two key pieces of legislation that were important not only to us but cities across the state. And then we're moving into this next legislative session. So the way the league works is that we have a legislative affairs committee. They start to meet usually in August, and it's a group of our members, and we kind of look at what we think is going to be pending legislation coming up the next year, and then also legislation that maybe we want to introduce that we think is going to be important for local governments moving forward. The Legislative Affairs Committee puts together they review our policy statements, which is a general view of our legislative theory, I guess. And then we also put together a list of anywhere from 5 to 6 legislative priorities. So going into this session, the two that we ended the session battling with last year, and then we picking up and really are becoming really moving forward this year. One is Wayfair, which is.
Do you want to explain what?
Yeah,
okay.
and so Wayfair is the ability for municipalities, counties, and the state government to collect internet sales tax. Wayfair was a Supreme Court case a few years ago that kind of reversed an old ruling that dealt with internet sales tax, and it's kind of complicated. I don't want to delve into that unless somebody has a specific question, but Wayfair basically said that yes, states did have the authority to collect sales tax on purchases from out of state. Since that ruling, which was in 2017, Missouri is one of 2 states that hasn't adopted internet sales tax. And the priority really isn't just so that we can collect internet sales tax for local governments. There's really a true disadvantage to our local brick and mortar stores if a out-of-state seller automatically has a 8% discount because they don't have to charge buyers or consumers sales tax. And it's really been accelerated by the pandemic. Economists say that the explosion of internet sales this past holiday season has really put us to the point where they would have expected as a nation internet sales to be in 2025, increasing by almost 40% over this holiday season. So those are sales that aren't taking place locally. Those are revenues that aren't being collected, and it's those impacting local governments to the point where they're looking at the services that they're providing and how can they keep providing those with a declining revenue source. So Wayfair is a big piece of legislation. We really hope that I think there's 4 or 5 bills dealing specifically with Wayfair this year. We're not in support of all of them because of other things they have tied to them. Right. But we're pretty optimistic that Wayfair will pass this year. And the other one is kind of is more of a negative to municipalities, but it's a kind of a negotiation with the legislature in that they're kind of tying these 2 bills together, which currently cable companies pay a franchise fee to local governments. And as part of this negotiation, there's going to be a rollback in the franchise fees. So starting in 2027, the current, for most municipalities, 5% franchise fee will be reduced by 0.5% for 5 years. So it will cap out at 2.5%. So the consumer is going to save a little bit on their cable bills, but hopefully we'll get Wayfair instituted. And there's one other key component to Wayfair. All the local governments in the state, again, this is the way our tax structure is. It isn't like this in other states. But for instance, Olivet will have to pass a use tax in order to collect the internet sales tax. Currently right now, only about 1/3 of the municipalities and counties across the state actually have gone to the voters and successfully passed a use tax. So there still will be some hurdles that municipalities have to make in order to collect that internet sales tax.
Yeah, it's an awful lot to take in when we're talking about Wayfair. It's a large bill. It has required a lot of people to come together to make some sort of compromises. Getting it across the finish line is going to be somewhat of a challenge because, again, it's the devil is in the details, and getting it to the end now will be interesting at the very least. And the other is the video franchise fee. I'm curious as to how all the streaming services, do they fall under the video franchising, or is that a separate thing altogether? And have they talked about that out in Jefferson City?
Well, another component, that's a great lead in, Mayor. Another component to the video franchise legislation is it would establish a right-of-way task force to really look at the issue that you just brought up, which is the streaming industry. You know, the streaming industry provides their services, which is basically just like cable. You know, it's providing video content to the consumers. They're not paying any fees right now because they're using the internet and coming in over the cable lines. So the purpose of the task force is really to look at new technologies and see how we can capture some revenues from them, and see if we can't come up with a better system to adapt to new technologies as we move forward. You know, even 10 years ago, nobody even thought of streaming. You know, that you'd be having Netflix and Hulu and Disney and all these other options that are using the right of way. They're using the cable lines, they're using the fiber lines, but they're not paying anything to do that.
Yeah, so yeah, it's interesting how, and we just had this conversation as it related to the cameras in here as well, that the technology has exploded in the last 10 years. Our legislation and our laws have not kept pace with it, and now we are in the process of trying to catch up so that we can stay apace with it and to capture those revenues. And it isn't really only about capturing the revenues, but when people are using the right of way, there's a fee that the city has for all of that. There's a maintenance sort of fee or whatever it may be that we have to put out. We need to sort of capture all of that back so that we're more, at least sort of net zero, if not, being able to replenish some of the revenues that we're losing from other things as well. Right. So it seems that the plate is pretty full out in Jeff City this legislative season.
Well, and you bring up a good point about the right of way, and I think a lot of people don't really understand what the right of way is and the responsibility that the municipalities have. I mean, the right of way is really it's not just the grass strip where the telephone poles are.
Right.
The right of way is really from the edge of the sidewalk to the completely across the street to the other edge of the sidewalk.
Right.
And so that, the cities are responsible for not only maintaining where the telephone company is putting their fiber optic lines, but also the concrete street in between. And so the right of way is a huge expense to local governments. The maintain it from, again, repairing streets to plowing the snow is all right of way maintenance.
Yep.
And then, everybody wants to use it, so every
Right.
utility or needs to use it, I should say, so every utility, and it's becoming more crowded. And so you have to be able to have some control. And really that's a right given to the municipalities by the owners of those properties, and the consumers that live in the community, expect the cities to maintain that and make sure that they have the utilities delivered to their houses and those kinds of things, So it is a big responsibility. I think a lot of people don't think about.
Right. It is a double-edged sword. You want to make sure that the utilities are there for the consumer, but every time they dig up your street, you also have to make sure that they put it back correctly, or that you have the ability to make sure that it's put back correctly. And then you're right, given the last, 2 weeks, plowing the streets and all of that, it is a huge financial responsibility for the city.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about.
Well, I'm sorry, do you
ahead.
want to talk just a little bit more about legislation?
Oh,
in the state?
absolutely.
Because
Sure,
you
sure,
started to say that and I brought
Yeah,
up there
yeah.
right away. Just to give the listeners a perspective, some of the other legislation that's out there, well, usually every year the legislature introduce anywhere, maybe 2,500 bills. And probably 25 to 30% of those bills impact local government. And so we do a legislative update every Friday, our league does. We post that, we send it out to all of our elected officials and post it on our website, which anybody can go take a look at. It's stlmuni.org. And, currently we have about 275 bills that we're following at the Capitol today. So other ones that may interest people is, a bill that would require all of the local elections or all elections in the state of Missouri to all be on the November ballot. So no more April municipal elections, no more elections in August, no more special elections in June. So here in St. Louis County, you could see a go to vote and there could be literally 60 plus items on your ballot. Obviously we're opposed to that. So we're lobbying against that. There's legislation on police reform this year, and we actually lobbied in support of that. We worked in St. Louis County and our league members, all of our members are either accredited police departments or working towards that. And so that's going to be all but 3 municipal police departments in St. Louis County. So we feel that the rest of the state should be at the same standards we are.
Right.
Right. And just so listeners know, the national average on accredited police departments is only 5%. And even before all of the, what I would say, downgrading of police, before Michael Brown and those instances, 18 municipalities in St. Louis County were accredited police departments, which is 2/3 of our membership. So that have police departments. So we were way ahead of the curve before, but now we're just taking it to the next level. So all kinds of legislation, and we have to constantly monitor that. So
yeah, it is a monumental job. Once the legislature goes into session, I know that you spend a lot of time out in Jeff City because it's really important for all of us. As you said, so many of those bills affect the municipalities and the outcomes. If we're not lobbying for our municipalities, the tenor and the tone in Jeff City has been very anti-municipality, and they seem to be very punitive and want to be punitive against the munis here, especially in St. Louis County.
Yeah, during the legislative session, I usually spend at least 2 days a week in Jeff City. But as you know, the league also has hired additional lobbyists that are in Jeff City all the time.
Yeah.
Because one of the good things about the pandemic this year is the fact that they've allowed online testimony for hearings. Prior to this year, you had to be in Jeff City to speak on a bill. And, and the legislature, unlike local governments, could put a bill on a committee hearing at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday to be heard at 8 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday. So we are constantly monitoring the legislation, constantly monitoring the hearings, and we have to be prepared to be there to do the work we need to do.
Right. Let's go back and first, how many members do we have? We have 88 municipalities are members of the league.
88. There are 88 municipalities, and 83 of them are members of the league.
Okay.
St. Louis County government is a member, and St. Louis City government are members of the league.
So not all municipalities, and I don't know if the listeners know this, not all municipalities have their own police departments. Some are policed by the county and they have a contract with the county to be policed. Going back to, of the municipalities that have police departments, the vast majority of them are accredited or working on their accreditation. There are only 3 that are not working on any accreditation whatsoever. Is that correct?
And that's why they're not members of the league.
Right.
Our membership voted, I guess it was 4 years ago
Yeah.
now. We voted that, you know, if you are a member of the league and you had a municipal police department, that you needed to be accredited. And we did that working kind of along with our collaboration. We did that along with the St. Louis Area Police Chiefs Association. They adopted the same policy. So that's why 3 of those cities are no longer members of the league.
Mhm.
And then, you know, one other one is Champ, which is, you know, 12 people. So that's
Right.
not really, to be quite frank, a city. And just one of the other cities just opted not to. So yeah, and I think that's important. I think as local leaders, as an organization that's made up of local governments, we need to set those high standards.
Right. And I think, you know, now in circling back to the whole Better Together, part of their push was to disband our police departments and to bring them into one regional police department, as opposed to allowing us to have control, our own local control, our own local, you know, standards, so to speak, but standards that were set by either CALEA or Missouri police chiefs. But I think the whole conversation of this regional approach it's an interesting conversation because you cannot be a member and sit inside of a region and not think regionally, even if you like the local tenor and tone of your own municipal government. So, you know, we talk a lot about the region and how we can make this a better region. And I think one of the things that people discount is the collaboration that we all have as municipalities, whether it's governmental cooperation, police cooperation, even to some extent fire department cooperation, especially on the municipal level. We do a lot of mutual aid with other municipal fire departments. But there are factors that are at play right now that really hamper our ability to become a region and a region of stature. And, you know, we've talked about it at the league level, but what, in your opinion, what do you think are the 2 biggest factors or multiple factors that really hamper us to get to that next level that everybody seems to think that they want to be at?
Right. Yeah. In the Better Together movement was, you know, they tried to blame that lack of expansion, lack of regionalism on the number of municipalities in St. Louis County.
Right.
And really that was just a money grab in order to fund some of the things that they wanted to do, by consolidating the police departments, by consolidating the municipalities, but it really didn't have any impact on regional growth.
No.
You know, and so I think that one of the things that was really a drawback is from a regional perspective, from a metropolitan statistical area, which includes area, you know, all the way over to Illinois to Wentzville, you know, from that perspective is we didn't have that go-to organization, that go-to leader. You know, we had, and I think that the city it got some press in December and in January, but I don't think it really it hasn't sunk in yet to I think a lot of people. But you know, some of these economic development organizations, some of these business leading organizations finally I think realized that was really what was holding us back. And they merged, and it was in the news, they merged the St. Louis Regional Chamber, the Arch of the Park organizations, Alliance St. Louis, Downtown St. Louis, and Civic Progress. And they merged that into what is now called Greater St. Louis, Inc. And I think it's really one of the biggest steps forward that St. Louis has taken in a long time. When I was battling Better Together, in almost every presentation that I did in debates with their members, I said, and I was using Amazon as an example. When Amazon was looking for a new headquarters throughout the United States, 2 weeks before that application was due, I was at the East West Gateway, which is our regional planning authority for our metropolitan statistical area, at their meeting. It's made up of the county executives from throughout the region. The president of the league serves on East West Gateway, so you're on their executive board right now representing our municipalities, and a few other members. So 2 weeks before the Amazon proposal is due, they're arguing about who's going to submit the application. And that's the kind of regional tension we have. There wasn't that go-to leader, that go-to organization that's going to be, when an Amazon is looking at a region, that they're going to go to that organization and they're going to be in contact with them and work with them on attracting those big businesses. I said at those debates with Better Together, when Amazon was looking for location, they didn't come to Olivet. No. They want to look for that regional organization that's going to give them the information they need. Right. And to be quite frank, and I truly do believe this, I can't think of a better location for an organization like Amazon for what they were looking for.
Absolutely.
With our access to transportation, our underutilized airport, our cost of living, the quality of our homes, the quality of our neighborhoods. I just think we have a lot of things. And Jason Hall, who is the leader of this new, Greater St. Louis Inc., he's a real advocate for St. Louis, and it's really refreshing to actually hear somebody as a leader of the region talking positive about the area instead of criticizing it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It was very unfortunate that egos kind of got in the way of that whole Amazon situation. I don't know if they would have necessarily chosen us as their final location, but I do think the region has a lot to offer to them. But I do think that you're right, having one larger group that those sorts of corporations can go to help guide them through a process of considering a location is much more beneficial for all the parties concerned than trying to negotiate with an individual municipality. It's not that we can't do it, we absolutely could do it, but that is not how they're used to doing business. They're used to doing business at a much higher level within a much bigger situation. And so I'm glad that Jason has taken the helm of this new group, and let's see what comes out of it. I think, when he spoke to us as a group last month, he was very gung-ho. And I think that that's going to be something that's going to drive that group forward. I know you and I have talked about the whole issue of crime, and crime needs to be brought under control too, because that is a very negative situation. And I know one of the things that Better Together kept saying was, well, if we merge all the statistics together, it will all look better. And while numbers, anyone can play with numbers to make them look any way you want them to. The fact is that crime is still occurring, and that is an issue that needs to be brought under control. And I have no answers for that and how to do it, but I think it is an impediment because the negative publicity is out there, and that is an impediment to getting major corporations wanting to relocate here.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think that really was kind of the start of Better Together, was really dealing with the crime statistic. And what you're referencing is that because St. Louis City is its own county, which a lot of people don't know that. So when we had this separation, they became their own county. they have their own crime report. That's the way the
Mhm.
FBI does crime statistics. And so that's where we get the #1 ranking, because they're dividing their murder rate by their 300,000 in population. If they were combined with St. Louis County, if they were a municipality within the county, St. Louis then would go from first to 89th in murder statistics nationally. Matter of fact, Springfield and Kansas City would have a higher murder rate than St. Louis if that was done. But to your point, that doesn't solve the problem. I mean, we do have a crime issue here, and I think, statistics show that it's actually accelerated because some of the court reforms that were initiated in the state of Missouri after Michael Brown, and that was Senate Bill 5 that was introduced by Senator Schmidt at the time, who is now our Attorney General. And as an example, if you talk to policemen, they'll tell you that, multiple occasions have they pulled somebody over for something, and they, find a gun in the car, or they find, drugs and those kinds of things, and maybe averted some kinds of crimes. But because of the, I would say, negative press on police pulling people over, giving them tickets and so forth, because of that and the changes in the court reform, if a police officer issues a speeding ticket today in the state of Missouri, to be quite frank, you don't have to pay it. The court has no mechanism to issue a warrant to make you come to court. Since those court reforms, even before the pandemic, most municipal courts throughout the state were at about 50% of the tickets that they were issued. Since the pandemic, because the courts are, St. Louis County courts are closed, not the rest of the state municipal courts. But, so they have to do it online. Courts are at about 10% of people responding, but there's no penalty for that now. They can't put out a warrant. They can't force people to come in. And so I think that, and to be quite frank, the bad guys know that. And so I think that's why you see so much more speeding on the highways. You have people, police try to pull them over and they drive away because the police aren't supposed to pursue them anymore. And so I think all these things have added to really, it might not be the right word, but the arrogance of some of our criminal element within the region. We have a lot more carjackings now. We have violent crime seems to be, unfortunately, everywhere. And I think it's going to take the general public to really, to help and say, hey, we want to resolve these issues. We want our laws to be enforced, and we want people to be held accountable. And because I think, in every industry, there's bad people. But I truly believe that 99.9% of our officers, of our police and firemen, our public safety employees, they're dedicated people out there trying to do the best they can for their communities, and we need to support them, and they need to have the tools in order to do their job.
Yeah, I think SB 5 was that was a piece of legislation that was not well thought through. It had a lot of just unintended consequences that should have been realized, but in a rush to push it through, it was court reform, it was revenues,
limits.
It was revenue limits, court reform, and police certification, all of those sorts of things, some of which were fine, but it was, as we started to say in the beginning, the municipalities within St. Louis County, and if we wanted to do a study of this, we could show this very clearly. The municipalities within St. Louis County and the county in general have become the punching bag of the legislators in Jeff City. It is more often than not, and SB 5 is a clear illustration of this. where the county had to adhere to a different revenue number than the rest of the state. Ours was much lower than the rest of the state. And that was done deliberately. I mean, it was done, they thought about it and they decided to do it, and they all raised their hand and said, yep, this is a great idea. And then they did it, and then it was challenged. But the reality is that this is not outside the norm. This is the norm out there for us. And you know, we as a county, we do have our problems. The rest of the state has its problems too. But yeah, we need to work hard to get our reputation under control and to get our crime under control, and to have that other piece of the puzzle where then somebody who goes out to advocate for us can in fact advocate, because St. Louis has so many great things about it. As we said, neighborhoods, housing, cost of living. And for me, I think one of the hidden gems here is our medical community. We have phenomenal hospital systems here, not just one, multiple hospital systems here that you don't find except in major cities. Right. I mean, Siteman, to have a place like Siteman here is unbelievable.
And Children and Cardinal Glennon, two major children hospitals, right?
All of those here is unbelievable. You don't find that. You have to go to New York, maybe Houston, LA, you know, places like that, Chicago, to find that sort of thing. It's unbelievable. And we, you know, if you're not from here, you realize that. But if you've lived here all your life, it's hard to know that is a hidden gem here, to have that sort of medical care available to us that close by.
Yeah, that was interesting in Senate Bill 5, because really, my opinion is really that was a piece of legislation driven by Better Together. Then Senator Eric Schmidt, was aligned with the Better Together movement. And to your point, some of the court reforms were statewide, but in the bill specifically said that municipalities in St. Louis County couldn't collect revenues, or couldn't collect ticket revenue over 12.5% of their general revenue funds.
Right.
The rest of the state, it was 20%. And then it also said that all the police departments in St. Louis County had to be accredited, but not the rest of the state.
Correct.
And I think it's important to know that and then plus a number of other court reforms and procedures and how they operated and those kinds of things. And it's really in an effort to try to force some of the smaller municipalities to dissolve, basically. Yep. And what was interesting, though, fast forward to 4 or 5 years later, the impact in outstate Missouri is really where Senate Bill 5 really hurt. Over 200 municipal courts in outstate Missouri had to close.
Wow. Because
they weren't being monitored properly. None have closed in St. Louis County. Some have merged together to be more efficient, which is a good thing.
Yep.
But they did it on their own. And but none of the municipal courts closed in St. Louis County. To be quite frank, we just did a survey, and all but two municipal courts in St. Louis County are well below 12.5% anyway. So I think it really kind of goes to, as you were saying, that collaboration, because all of that ties together in how a lot of our municipalities work. The residents don't care where you get your salt, right? To plow your street. They just want to know when you need it, you have it. But the cities, most of the cities joined together, 15, 20 years ago, and we do bulk purchasing of salt. Chesterfield stores it, and the municipalities are able to go out there and access the salt, and we get better pricing, we get better consistency to make sure we have it when it's needed, and so forth. And another big one that I just touch on collaboration is insurance. There's an organization that was started over 30 years ago called SLATE, St. Louis Area Insurance Trust, for the municipalities, because at that time, they couldn't get insurance for the police department's liability insurance. So they went self-insured, and over the years, they've expanded that into other financial or insurance services for the municipalities. And then in 2005, they started health insurance.
Yep.
And there's 19 of the municipalities participate. You have to have a city manager in order to participate in the insurance program to make sure it's professionally run. But that has been so successful in saving money for municipalities. Only 1 year have they had more than a double-digit increase in insurance, and that was the first year. Since then, it's been less than a 5% increase every year. 3 years ago, they had a surplus in their reserves. They were able to return over $1 million to the participating municipalities, and it's just been a huge, huge success. But and again, it's not something that municipalities go out and brag about.
No,
you know, but it's just what they do in order to be as efficient as they can with the taxpayers' money. And again, it's not something that really is concerning the residents. You know, but it concerns the elected officials that are making sure that they have appropriate benefits and are able to give their employees what they need so that they can do their jobs.
Yep. It's
and there's more and more of those examples.
Yeah, there's a ton of those examples. And so, you know, when people say we are fractured, they have zero idea what they're talking about, because the fact of the matter is that is not the case. There is, as you said, a ton of evidence for collaboration. See if anyone has a question, and maybe we can talk a little bit about the airport.
Yeah,
that's another one of my favorite topics, the airport.
Mayor, I do have one question.
Sure.
Inquiring about how the municipal league is financed.
So we are, again, we're made up of our membership. So all the cities pay an annual dues. We also have about 50 affiliate members, and these are organizations, engineering companies, utilities, Ameren, you know, that they pay dues to the municipality on an annual basis as well. Our dues are based on population. You know, so the larger cities over 20,000, we actually have 7 categories. I'm not going to get these all right, but I know that the highest due that any cities pay, and that's for cities over 20,000, is $7,500 a year. And then the lowest dues for the smallest cities is about 460. So, and we have a range in between there. So, you know, that's where our funding comes from. We are a very lean organization.
Right, very
we have myself, and I have an assistant director. At one time, you know, depending on what's going on, the league did have up to 5 employees. And so, that's where our funding comes from.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
Not at this time.
Okay. So let's talk about the airport, because I think the airport, I'm trying to think where I heard this. I think I was listening to the business news on TV, and they were talking about executives flying in and out of cities. And most executives don't want to change planes for whatever reason. They don't seem to want to do that. It's not a big deal, but they'd prefer to get on the plane and then get off the plane at their destination and go to their meeting and then get back on a plane and go home. St. Louis used to be the hub. This was before I got here, but for TWA. And then TWA sold to American, and American promised to stay here. And then they quickly turned around and thumbed their noses at St. Louis and said, yeah, not so much, because we have a hub in Chicago and we have a hub in Dallas, and we're not going to have a hub here too. So we'll fly in and out of here as often as we can. And we may have some nonstops in and out of here, but over time, and I noticed this even after we moved here, over time, there were less and less nonstops, and more you had to change planes someplace else. And then Southwest came in, and they were small, and now they have become quite large, and the vast majority of the flights that take off from Lambert are Southwest. I would say they're 75% of the flights out of Lambert are Southwest now. But Southwest has a different approach to their business model, and they are more, they're gonna jump around kind of thing. There are some nonstops with Southwest to major cities, but smaller cities, you're still gonna change planes someplace. So in talking about the airport, I know this is, so for those who don't know, the airport is not owned by the county, it's owned by the city.
Right.
And
It's in the county.
it's in the county, but it's owned by the city. And I know that there's been a lot of talk about trying to make the airport, again, a jewel, and it is, but it can be so much better for that whole regional approach, and as a way to help, not necessarily jumpstart, but to help that whole regional approach to getting those huge corporations back into St. Louis. I mean, we used to hub so many of the Fortune 500 companies right here. They used to be here, and now they've gone someplace else. But to draw others back in here, I think the airport is an important component, and it serves so many counties now, not just St. Louis County,
Right.
or the city.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's one of the problems with the airport. And I don't want to say this in the wrong way, but it is owned by St. Louis City. There's no doubt, so they control it. And yet it's a regional necessity.
Right.
And so, and I don't want to say it's a regional asset because it's controlled by the city.
Right.
And so, for instance, because it's grandfathered in, and I think it's one of two airports in the country where the owners, the city, can actually take money out of the airport. So every place else that has gotten federal funds to expand the airport and use federal money, which St. Louis Lambert has done, any revenues that they generate have to go back into the airport. So for instance, St. Louis takes about $6 million a year of revenue away from the airport that they use for city expenses. And that's just an example of it's not being managed or taking into the regional perspective is the concern. The state did set up a regional kind of airport commission, which is made up of some of the county executives a number of years ago, initiated then by County Executive Ellman when he was in the state legislature. But they have no authority. It's just purely advisory. And, so those decisions are being made by St. Louis City. That being said, though, there's no doubt that the airport has a huge impact on our region and our regional growth. There is a organization that was formed, I guess it's probably been 4 years ago now, called St. Louis Freightway. And it's really came out of Bi-State when John Nations was the executive director of Bi-State. And the focus of the St. Louis Freightway is really looking at St. Louis as a national and world leader in logistics. And it's really it's really, I think, of the future of our growth for the region. And one of the key components are the airports in our region. Lambert is well underutilized, we know that, but we also have the Midwest Airport over in Illinois. And then, we have the barge industry, we're the furthest north or furthest port north on the Mississippi without any, what do you call them? Not dams, but the
locks.
Locks, with furthest north without any locks. And we're the largest inland port in the entire country in the St. Louis area. Train hub, one of the first big initiatives of the Freightway was actually to secure funds both privately and federally to build a new railroad bridge across the Mississippi. The bridge that they're currently using was built over 140 years ago.
Wow.
Trains that cross it have to slow down to 20 miles an hour, the freight trains.
Right, that creates a
You know,
problem.
and so, so this was a huge step in developing us as a transportation hub again, and then highways as well. We have so many highways. So it really is kind of going to be one of our future industries in the entire region, and the airport's a key component of that. The other thing that was a few years ago that they tried to secure state funding for was for St. Louis to become what they called at that time the China hub,
Yes.
which was to become the hub location for large planes transporting and sending goods to China. I think that that's still out there. What I learned during those debates, I thought was really interesting. Our location really is still the best because it's not that they fly east and west to go to China. They actually go over the North Pole.
Yeah.
And so, and we're still, that industry is still out there, and that opportunity. And I think that, if they're able to land something like that with the efforts of the Freightway organization, you're hopefully will see that expansion of the airport. We've been meeting, as you know, the league members with our county executives to talk about the airport. We've been meeting with St. Louis City to see how we can collaborate to try to initiate some improvements to the airport, to help them fund some of the things that they need to make it grow. We initiated those conversations, the league did, through our leadership of our executive board, because we think it is important for the region. And if the airport expands and grows and attracts more people to the region, and that's good for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. Barbara, are there any other questions for us? We're happy to take them, as we're chatting.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. How do you feel about public versus private? Oh, for the airport. That's the one that was answered. I apologize.
No, we didn't answer public.
Not
versus
yet.
private. No, we haven't.
Oh,
we didn't
okay. How do
answer
you
that
feel
yet.
about public versus private for the airport?
Well, my opinion, I think really the league's opinion is really that it should be governed by the local governments. My theory personally is if private industry can make money, that's the only reason they would do it with the airport. Why can't we? And then put those funds back in there to make the airport grow.
Yeah.
I think the conversation to sell the airport or to privatize it under a lease was really more of a opportunity for St. Louis City to acquire a big sum of money. And that's not a regional approach. We need to make decisions for the airport based on how it's going to be best for the entire region.
Right. And I personally think that the airport is a piece of that, going back to that Freightways conversation. The airport is a piece of that Freightways. And if people have driven out towards Hazelwood and out in that area and seen the expansion of warehouse spacing, just imagine if you could develop that China hub, the proximity to the airport where goods can be stored and then taken to the airport and then sent to China, likewise come back with other goods from China and placed in those warehouses and then disseminated out throughout the country from a central location. You can easily reach either coast, north and south, in 3 days maximum. That's where you are. And this is the perfect location. But to allow a private organization then to insert itself into a component of what needs to be a far more regional approach to all of our logistical needs I'm not so sure that would work well for all of us. I think the government agencies understand the changing landscape here in a better way. And I think that they can do, I think if they put their minds to it, and I think they put their heads into the game, we can do as good, if not better job. It really requires us, though, to manage all of these things with the same skill set that we bring to managing municipalities. We run things lean here, and we run things tight here because we're that first line of contact between the resident and government. And so we are, I think, the most accountable. And so if that was how all of that came together with that level of accountability, I think we could do a great job.
Right, I couldn't agree with you more. Local government, the municipalities, they're providing the services that people see every day. Nobody wants to have to call a police officer, but they want to know when they do that they're going to be there.
Yep.
And it's like Olivet, they know that they
Yep.
have that confidence.
Yep.
Same way with police.
Yep.
And I don't want to stir things up, but trash as well. We were talking with Barb, the city administrator, earlier, and the one thing you don't want to mess with is residents' trash. But those are services everybody that they see every day, and that's the role of the municipal government. It's not to manage the airport. But that doesn't mean, as you started the conversation today with, that we shouldn't be part of that conversation, that we shouldn't be saying, well, how can we maybe help foster that?
Right.
And that's kind of what the league has done in
Right.
that conversation, say, okay, well, these groups aren't talking, so how can we bring them together to talk?
Right.
It's not our role, again, like I said, to run the airport, but maybe we can start those conversations to
Right.
make it better.
And
in the
bring all the
future.
right people
Right.
together. Is there any other questions for us?
There are not right now. Does anyone have anything, or would you like to raise your hand? We could, we can open it up as well, Mayor, whatever you would
Well, we're gonna
like.
talk, we're gonna talk a little bit about CARES funding, which
Mhm.
I think, Pat is owed a huge thank you for that, because if you had not been bold enough to say to the county executive, hey, the municipalities could use some of that money from the CARES funding that the county got, they got, if I remember correctly, $127 million
Yes.
from the
Right.
federal government in the probably springtime area, somewhere around.
Yeah, it was
May,
early. It was,
April, May.
yeah,
in one of the-
first of April, right? Yeah.
They got $127 million from CARES Act funding for the county. And Pat, in a conversation with Sam Page, said the municipalities need to have $45 million of that money in order to make them, if not whole, to at least help them through some of the difficulties that had transpired throughout the pandemic. We had, business closures, or at least temporary closures. So we lost revenue from sales tax. We still had police and fire doing their jobs. Some municipalities, like the city of Olivet, had people working in shifts, some people home, some people not. We still had to pay these people, even though they may not have been here. We were trying really hard. Barb was, really planned this out so that we didn't have everyone in contact with everyone, so that if we did get an outbreak inside the city, we didn't find ourselves with, every police officer home with COVID, every firefighter home with COVID. And now we had to rely again on our mutual aid, which was there. But if that wasn't being managed in the same way in other municipalities, you could find yourself in a really dire situation. So having said all of that, Pat was able to secure for the municipalities $45 million that was divided on a per capita basis between all the municipalities, regardless of whether they're members of the municipal
Right.
league or not. It was divided amongst all the municipalities. So I forget what the exact number was per person that we all got.
I think it was $69
$100.
per person is what it came out to.
Okay.
you know, and really when the CARES Act was first issued by the federal government, there were no funds for local governments. I mean, they specifically said that in the legislation. And really what was the impetus of it? But the county executive it kept saying, well, if we can do anything, we will. And so,
Okay, then.
yeah, so again, President Trump actually directed the head of the Treasury Department and said, no, some of these funds have to be used for local public safety employees, police and fire, EMS, dispatchers, and those kinds of things. So that opened up the door to allowing some of those funds to come to the municipalities. And so we went back to the county executive, and and I appreciate what Ruth said about me, but really it was really a credit to the membership that we all stuck together and stayed on the same page when we were, no pun intended with same page, but you know, that we really kept and stood behind the message that this is the amount of funds we think we're due, and this is how we should allocate them on a per capita basis, because there were a bunch of different debates in that. So, and that started in May. But the allocations are almost complete now. Cities didn't get their first allocation until almost December, even though our debate started in May. And but you know, in those funds went directly to help support the municipal police and fire departments and dispatchers and those people that were really frontline out there providing those services during the pandemic. So it was good to do and to be part of. You know, because municipal revenues in St. Louis County generally are down about 5%. Because of the pandemic, which is not as bad as we thought it was going to be. No. But still, that's 5% that goes to providing those services. Interesting enough, we also, as a league, one of the other jobs we do is we administer the St. Louis County Park Grant Commission. So we administer about $8 million in municipal parks grants a year. So we track their sales tax. Well, their sales tax isn't that park sales tax, which goes to pay for the Great Rivers Greenway and other things. It's not collected on food or pharmaceuticals. So that sales tax was actually down almost 15% last year. And I think that's a true indicator of what's happening to the brick and mortar stores, because those are the ones that, you know, is a tax that we get. You know, because even though restaurants are shut down, people are spending a lot more at the grocery stores, those kinds of things. Right. So,
but if the grocery store is not part of that calculation,
right? But it is part of your municipal sales tax. Right. So that's why there's that disparity between the 5% and the 15%. But yeah, so municipal revenues were down. So it was just something that was the right thing to do, and we were able to take advantage of it. So.
Yep, it was great. I think, full disclosure, the city of Olivet received about $532,000, which, while it is significant money, certainly did not completely cover salaries and for either our police or fire through that time period. And time period went from May 1st, I believe, till the end of December. That was right. we had to send in all sorts of proof and, you know, whatever to the county in order to be able to get the full allotment of the money that was
the city staff once we got approval, really the city staffs had to do a lot of work in order to acquire the funds. They had to turn in a lot of information, and to their credit, the ones that are professionally run, that have a city administrator, that have full-time staff, it was a lot easier, even though it was still cumbersome. But you know, they stepped up to the plate and got that done so that they could get the funds. It was great.
Yeah.
So.
Are there any other questions for us? We don't have a chatty group this morning.
I do not see any, Mayor. Anyone have anything? Raise your hand. Or
does anyone have anything for me? Questions for me? No. Quiet group this morning.
It's cold out.
It's cold out.
It's a great morning though to see the sunshine, and it's only 18 degrees out.
Well, I want to thank you, Pat, for joining us this morning. Because we live, eat, breathe the politics of the region and the politics of the state, we could probably talk about this forever, but
Right.
it is a really fascinating subject. The League is a great organization. It does do a lot of really, really good things for the municipalities. It is their champion out in Jeff City. And I think that is something that cannot be said enough. And, you do a great job. So many people, and you have a way of being able to bring people together, talk to people. And I think that is an asset that the League has. And I think it's an important asset for them. So I thank you for that.
Oh.
You've made my year a really easy year in spite of all of the craziness that we've lived through in this last year. It's been a really good year. Have also not conducted a meeting in person with anyone since I took the seat. It's okay though.
Yeah. We started off the year last year, and I know you know this, but we hold our annual meeting in May for our installation of our new officers, which Ruth would have been inducted into
right.
as president. And last May, we had scheduled, the governor was going to be our
Yep.
keynote speaker
Yep.
for the first time ever. We had to cancel that meeting
Yep.
because of COVID. Had
Did it
to have
on
a
Zoom.
Zoom meeting for the officers to be sworn in, and it's just been a different time.
It has
So
been a
it's
very
great.
different time,
So,
but it's been really very rewarding and really, really fun. So we have a couple more months left. We've got work to do still ahead, and we're going to keep doing it. So
well, I appreciate being here. It's fun. So
well, good.
it's nice to be talking to people.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening. And next month, have not set my Zoom yet, but we are going to have an interesting format. So we're getting that all together, and we'll share more of that with you. Kiana will blast that out to everybody. So thank you again. Thank you, Pat.
Thanks.
Everyone stay well, stay safe, and stay warm. Thank you.